Welcome to the Successful Nurse Coach podcast. On this podcast, Laura
and Shelby, both board certified nurse coaches, show you how to make as much money as you want in private practice as a nurse coach.
Welcome to the Successful Nurse Coach podcast this morning. We're so excited that you are listening to our voices. It is Shelby and Laura today, and we're doing an episode called The Power of Packages, Why Nurse Coaches Should Rethink Per Session Pricing. And this was inspired, as always, by a Facebook comment or I believe an email that I got with a nurse coach out of certification trying to figure out what she should price her coaching per hour. And she was very confused when I told her we don't price per hour. And that was confusing to me as well. When I graduated, that's how I thought of it. That's the way that my brain worked. I really looked for a lot of evidence of how I should price myself through my previous experiences of people that I had hired. And I had no context to how to sell coaching at all. And that's very different, Shelby, than you, because you were smart and hired a business coach. And so I think your first coaching you sold was a package. But we're going to talk about kind of introduce it and what we used to think in ways so that we can probably relate to where exactly that you are. And then we'll talk more about why, what we have seen work, and then why it's not what we recommend selling per hour.
Yeah, it's, I think about our two experiences starting out quite a bit because I never want to lose touch with what it's like to be new and just like the really normal questions that you have on like, how do I get started? And like, these are questions that Laura and I answer almost every day of every week for the past 5 years straight.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not common knowledge. We're kind of like looking at the world around us being like, what do people in a similar role, what do they do? And we're trying to pull a little confidence from that payment structure. And I hope today that we can like break it down in a more meaningful way for nurse coaching specifically. But I was so freaking green when I first started my practice. If my coach told me to jump off a cliff, I would have jumped off a cliff. Just literally whatever she said to do. And thank God she was a good business coach, because I know a lot of people hire weird first coaches because they just don't know, or it's the wrong coach for the wrong job. And yeah, she could have told me to do anything. She could have told me to charge per session and I just would have done it. There was really so much I didn't have any awareness over. But and I was in a group setting with my first coach too. And so there's a lot of people with similar resistance of like being able to really navigate financial questions with potential clients. And I remember she said all the time of like, listen, if you want to charge per session, like, okay, let's start there. We can totally start there. It won't surprise me that in 3 or 4 sessions, after you chase this client for 3 or 4 sessions, that you get tired of it and you don't want to keep working with people who have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, which tends to be the type of energy that structure pulls in, of people who want to take it, 1 session a month, or they're thinking about it. They're not like really all into the deep end of their own work. And I was like, I don't want to F with that at all. Like I just want the people who want to do it. If this is a way to weed folks out, then like, so be it. But if you have started out charging per session, if you have started out charging $50 a session, like nothing has necessarily gone wrong yet. We just want to paint a picture on why that might not be the most sustainable option too, moving forward, of like, this generates stability in your practice and attracts higher quality clientele into your practice as well.
Yeah. It's so interesting how flawed my thinking was as a new business owner. Because I remember thinking, well, I can charge $100 an hour. Like $100 an hour is great. That's a great job. Like that's a good hourly wage. But when you break it down, you're doing free calls, you're doing admin work, you're doing marketing, you have overhead. And so that $100 per hour, it would really probably boil down to be 30.
Yeah.
And then you're doing a whole energetic process for every $30 that you earn. You certainly aren't going to have 10 to 20 hours a week booked of one-offs in a private practice. And so very quickly you realize that this is charging coaching per hour will not ever sustain you financially. And then you'll end up quitting. And so it's not that it's wrong. It just doesn't work, period.
Right.
End of story. However, charging something is better than charging nothing. Having a paid client is having a paid client. So I still, people on in mentorship calls will do something weird, like they'll do a one-off and but they'll like won't tell me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'll always celebrate you. You're still coaching, you're still learning, you're still getting those hours, and you're getting paid. That's great. But if we're honest with one another, is this what's best for your client?
Mhm.
And 99% of the time, it's, well, no, but I didn't want to ask for because she's in between jobs or her husband's this or
Yeah.
so really they make it super, super affordable and super, super easy because they don't believe in the resilience and the agency of the person that they're coaching.
Mhm. Yeah, doesn't it suck whenever we make
Yeah.
it about us? Like, sorry to be the deliverer of spicy news this
Yeah.
morning, but usually it boils down to like our own discomfort with charging for packages. And when you're a new coach, like I totally get it. You don't have any experience. You don't
Yeah.
like it's saying $1,500 out loud is huge. Like that's
Yeah.
we're not ever taught whenever you go into a job to like, we don't get training in nursing school on like how to negotiate your hourly wage or, any of that sort of stuff. So,
Right.
like talking about money is very foreign for people, but I can 100% guarantee that people need to invest in more than one session with you to have any sort of meaningful change.
Right.
Like, if we are selling them on anything less, that feels like borderline. I mean, unethical is a strong word, but, like, are we really setting anybody up for success, you, the
Yeah.
client, or otherwise? Like, at
Right.
least give them 8 sessions to get to, like, get a good
Yeah.
swing to get a good
Right.
swing at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of how coaching is different than therapy or counseling because therapy and counseling, you are paying for the space that the therapist or the counselor is holding for you. And coaching, yes, you are holding space for people, but when they buy coaching from you, they are buying a future outcome. They are
Mhm.
buying a goal. They are buying a new reality that they don't currently have yet that's well defined. And then you, the professional nurse life coach or professional nurse coach, you have to decide how long most likely will it take for change to happen. We know it takes time to change. And then it's your responsibility to prescribe or advocate
Mhm.
for the best the most optimal way to get to that goal. And it is not going to be in 60 minutes of with you, no matter how great you are. It's
Mhm.
gonna be the insights, the homework in between. It's gonna be the length of the relationship. Sometimes clients don't even really open up to you till session 4 or session 5.
Right.
And so it's a relationship that you're beginning. There's a coaching relationship there that really aids the client in the transformation. And relationships don't happen in 60 minutes. They
Right.
happen in repetitive sessions over time. In mentorship, I feel like at the 6-month mark, everyone kind of feels like they know each other.
Yeah.
You know,
And, like,
it
that
takes
makes
time.
sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
I feel like that anything faster would, like, almost be placing unrealistic expectations on the
Right.
container, right? And you, Laura, have had, like, one-off sessions with
Yeah.
coaches that have been radically transformative, but you also paid $5,000 plus dollars for a
Yeah.
few hours, like, and it's a
Right.
whole thing. It's a whole thing from when you put the check into I still, like, remember this Facebook post that you
Yeah.
made in, like, 2020 or whenever it was, but, like, from putting the check in the mail and the build up to the meeting and the flying on the plane
Flying
and then
in.
getting
Yeah.
there and the taxi over, like, it's this whole initiation that's
Uh-huh.
likely designed on purpose from this coach to, like
And I
like
had 4 to 6 hours of homework I had to do prior to the session too.
Right. Yeah, and
Right.
so, like, I, like, have goosebumps, like, thinking about that. I went to a retreat this year to her similar. She was like, "The container opened when you said yes to this a year ago." Right? Like, we all knew it wasn't happening until 2024. You signed up in 2023, but, like, the space of it for this 5 days has been open for the
Right.
whole time, So there are, like, different versions of this that can work, but I also paid about 5 grand to go to that retreat, right? Like, I was in, and I was in, and I was excited about it for a long time before I went, the whole 9 yards. There's another coach that I fangirl over from time to time, and she doesn't do one-on-one coaching from what I can tell very often, but she opened up a few one-on-one spots for strategy in particular, and this is someone who's made millions of dollars over several years, who's able to, like, do a very extensive intake form and then spend 90 minutes with you and probably give you really, like, high quality nuggets of advice of, like, make this tweak, do this a little differently, all those things. But like that comes after years and years and years of experience, years of
Right.
having a niche, years of doubling down and doing your own learning, and years of someone building rapport and trust with you by following you on Instagram so that they'll spend 2 grand on a 90-minute session with you.
Right.
And when you are new, we don't have that kind of clout yet. We don't have that kind of confidence to like hold that kind of space for folks.
Right.
And like all things, Laura and I kind of talk a little bit in black and white here on the podcast because we are so hyper focused on like making it relevant for where you're at right now. But like I probably now 5 or 6 years in could hold like a $1,500 3-hour thing for someone, and have it be meaningful and impactful for the person.
Right.
But in the beginning, no way. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just where you are in the beginning.
Right. Yeah. And there's some exceptions. So I have a client who does something called a health blueprint session, and I think she charges $300 for it. And it's
Mhm.
an intake form and then 2 follow-up sessions, I believe. And it has a very specific purpose. It's like she's a nurse practitioner in functional medicine, but it's not meant to solve the problem.
Right.
And it's meant to give the client become problem aware, and it's a front end offer to then back end into a container where she can fully support the client from current health to future health.
Right.
And not everybody does that, but then she gets paid for her lead magnet. She gets paid for her front end offer, and that's worked. And I don't know her conversion rate yet, but things are totally taking off for her. It's really
Yeah.
exciting. And then I just hired someone we met at a retreat that we went to. I don't know if you knew this, Shelby, but I hired Abby to coach me on energy and do some energy work. And she
Mhm.
was she was $1,000 for 3-hour long sessions. And basically the sessions are every 3 weeks,
Yeah.
very like specific purpose, but that's still not one session. And it's, $1,000. It's
Right.
still $1,000 offer. And I think that's really helpful. And she'll probably back end me into something. I'm guessing. I'm
Yeah.
guessing that's not it. So there's places for this to work. But as far as thinking you'd have a website and a link for people to book, and then when people book, they pay you for the session, that model will not feed you, and that model will not sustain your practice.
Mhm.
And your clients won't get the kind of results that you want them to get to build a word of mouth practice either.
Right. Totally. It requires just like time invested on both ends. And I'll say that like there's a lot of our functional medicine nurse coaches who like the initial call with people is not like a normal call to where they like
Right.
need more health history. Like it's a lot of forms, it's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
They spend time before the call, and it begins to quickly feel out of balance whenever they're doing that for free. And so, we just flip the switch of like, all right, you've done 3 free ones, you're good enough. Let's charge for those. And then we recommend like crediting that investment to your back end
Yes.
offer, right? So even our mentor that we've paid an insane amount of money to, you bought his courses before we ended up,
Yeah.
and they're like a couple $1,000, and then he just credited, or reimbursed us or whatever it was,
Yeah.
once we like bought the higher ticket thing. We do this with our preceptorship if you buy the course. We do this with Make the Leap if you want to join mentorship, to where we're not dinging you twice per se, but like
Right.
if you got the value you needed in our $4,000 container, then awesome. Like go and be in the world. And then if you want more support, I'm not going to like charge you 3 times for our course that you have forever access to either. So there's like a way to ethically upsell in
Yes.
in a good way that people really appreciate too. Like
Yeah.
they feel the consideration on the back end.
Yeah, and there's lots of benefits for charging per package. And the first one is, I think we talk about this ad nauseum here, but it's the commitment of the client themselves. So the minute that the client pays you, the minute that the client charges their credit card or sends you a check or gives you cash, at that moment, giving you that money is their commitment to themselves. That is like a
Mhm.
really big moment. It's a moment where something begins to happen because it's the point of no return. You've spent $1,500, and the $1,500 you're spending on is the potential for your life to look a little bit different. And suddenly, when you've spent that money, it becomes the most important thing because you want to get your money's worth. And
Mhm.
I did this with weight loss just now. I mean, like I've just done this with weight loss. Could
Mm.
not stay on any kind of a program on my own, charged 5K, down 19 pounds. It's not like there's something magical that happened or I'm learning anything I didn't already know.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to spend 5K and not lose weight because that would suck, you know?
It's the uncomfortable amount for you. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
enough. It was enough.
Yeah.
And Well, and for 20 weeks or however long we estimated it was going to take for me to hit my goal, I'm in a container. I have a coach that I talk to every single week. Like she's going to ask me, all right, what's your weight? What's your weight every single week? The fact that Grace is going to ask me how much I weigh on Friday, you best believe I'm not eating Cheetos on Thursday. Like I'm just
Yeah.
not. I'm going to go for an extra walk is
Yeah.
what I'm going to do. So we want to allow our clients to have a commitment to themselves and having a length of time and an amount of money that isn't what they'd spend every day is a big part of that commitment. We don't want to gyp them
Mhm.
of that.
Yeah. And even I think that, gosh, in the beginning days of the successful nurse coaches, before we had a really well fine-tuned system that worked, we were, I mean, frankly, gypping people, right? Like we had this like 12-week container because, to be honest, committing to a full year with someone like freaked me out. I couldn't imagine spending a whole year with a group of group of clients, which is funny to look back on now. But like we were for a few months setting people up with unrealistic expectations of like what's possible within this 12 weeks, when in the reality the first 12 weeks we're really just like cultivating belief that you can even do this at all. And
Yeah.
then the clock starts and then we gain momentum and then I let you, like, your dream still dies on the table, because we don't get the traction necessary. Time is so important, and in a society where we are conditioned to want things and we have no patience and no, like, appreciation for the process or the trust that this takes, we're kind of, like, fighting a little bit of an uphill battle in our sales too. So, like, there's
Right.
people want the fastest solution, the quickest solution, and they literally just they don't know yet that they're talking to the fastest and quickest solution. Because if they would have done it by themselves already, they would have.
Yeah. Well, and that's this is why nurse coaches need sales training.
Mhm.
We need to understand this. So if on a cellular level, best way to do that is to purchase your own coaching program and have transformation inside of it. But we need to know it on a cellular level so that when a client's like, well, can't I just want to have like a session a month? Can't I just pay you per session?
Yeah, no. Mm,
Yeah, that we have a way of responding to that that isn't bullshit. That's like, I
right.
if that would work best for you, that's what I would do all day long. But you'd be wasting your money,
Yeah,
you
100%.
know?
100%. And there's, I think, a way of talking about that that comes from, like, a deep place of belief rather than like, whenever people reach out to us and they're like, "Can I just do the course?" I like, "Surely I can do it by myself." And I'm like, "Probably, but I also wanna be transparent with you that it's probably not the right tool for what you wanna create. It's good if you
Yeah.
wanna learn information, but, like, most people who just take our course with no support and float out in space don't do anything. And that feels terrible. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like it's not the kind of work that I want to do in the world. I don't want to sell it like it's going to magically solve your problems. I believe in the power of coaching. So like there's this dialogue that can happen of like, listen, you're in charge of your own destiny. You can absolutely do whatever you want, but like
Yeah.
don't get it twisted here. Like if you're going to be a product of coaching, it's easiest to just like jump in and do the work necessary to make this the thing long term. And people appreciate that. Some of them still buy our course and then they end up upgrading later, like
Right.
that's totally what it is. But we can't bypass the time that is necessary. I mean, for your business or for otherwise, for anything else either.
Yeah, there's value accumulates over time in the coaching relationship.
Mhm.
I used to think that people just needed to know what to do and then their lives would change, but deep down, people know exactly what they need to do. They just need the support and the implementation of it. And
Mhm.
I just purchased a LinkedIn course as we're promoting Nurse Life Coach Academy. And I think that's a great platform for this particular business. And so I'm in a group of, I don't know, like 18 women, all different backgrounds. And I had a meeting with the owner of the course and the lead coach, and she's an ICF sales coach. And I looked at her content and I was like, a lot of her content is, how to build a freebie and all the back end things that we already have. So I was like, well, is this going to be helpful for me? Because I mean, most of this I already have. I just really need someone to walk me through this platform, the features, what works best, and someone with
Yeah.
some expertise. And she said, well, 90% of the people who take my course don't implement. If you implement what's in the course, you're going to have success. As she said that, I'm like, I so feel you. I so feel you on that. And
Yeah.
I can ask her questions. It's like I'm taking her course. There's live calls that start soon, and I can ask her questions and I can get strategy. And sometimes all I need is like somebody who knows more than me to take a look at what I'm doing and say, why don't you try this or try this? Or why don't you slow down on
Right.
this or do more of this? And that's the implementation of the learning from the course. I couldn't have got that value if she said, yeah, book 1 hour session with me and I'll teach you everything about LinkedIn so that you can have success on LinkedIn. Like I'll learn LinkedIn the next 3 to 4 months and I have somebody that is supporting me through that entire process. And you guys, as the entrepreneur and as the coach, you're going to want a somewhat predictable income. You're going to need
Mhm.
to know what you need to do to produce X amount of revenue or income if you ever want to step away from your W 2, or if you want to go part time, or if you want to hire a coach, or you want to invest in your business in a certain way. And how could you ever predict how many people are going to magically book one-to-ones on your website? It's just,
Right.
I mean, I think that in other businesses this is different, but for nurse coaching practices, you'll never get to a place of some kind of predictability. And payment plans are great. We talk about this. We
Yeah.
prefer being paid in full, but there's something magical about payment plans as well, because there's
Mhm.
payments that hit your account every month. And I mean, let's talk about client outcomes a little bit more.
Well, one
Um,
thing I want to mention really quick on
yeah,
the predictable income piece, I just a few weeks ago did this like exercise with all of our mentees to where it's like, okay, we're at the beginning of August. What is your max client load? What are your current offers? 6 months, a year, whatever it may be, memberships, whatever you got on the plate. And then how many clients do you have right now? And then like march out the months. Tell me when these people started, clock out when they're going to end, when you're going to have more space, if you want to launch a workshop or enroll a group, like where does all of this stuff fit, right? We're kind of
yeah,
like putting together pieces of the puzzle. And I have a mentee that just graduated and I love her. I love her so much. We upgraded her relationship with money a lot over the years, and she's very like deeply in tune with the ethical side of charging. And so we she always came to the call like, I know you're going to tell me to up my price. I'm just not ready yet. And I'm like, okay, like that's fine, like totally fine. But I was kind of had a sneaky agenda for her during this outline of like, all right, if we tell you guys to start off at like $1,500 for a session, if you can stomach it, right? And
for
then
a package,
for
not
a
a session.
package, yes.
Yeah,
And then yeah, for a one-time session, shoot for the moon. But for a package, and usually people outgrow that pretty quick, to be honest. They sign
yeah,
like 2 or 3 clients and they're like, all right, 1,800, 2,400. The going rate in coaching for 3 months is anywhere from like 2,500 to 5K, maybe even
right.
more for like more specific niche stuff, but that's usually the range. And Laura and I have charged all of those numbers within that range. And usually,
Yeah,
the like 3,400 was like kind of like the sweet spot for our folks to get the best results, the best value. But you kind of max out. Like if you can have 10 one-on-one clients at a time, which is pretty typical for nurse coaches who have primarily a one-on-one practice, if we're only charging 1,500, we're capping, or if you do 8, right? Like, and then with back end offers to into a 6 month container, we limit your income like pre-tax to about like 90K there.
hmm,
And you're like, Shelby, that sounds great. And that sounds awesome. It is great and it is awesome. And I promise every coach that I've ever supported across the 6 figure line looks at me and goes, this is not enough for the lifestyle that I want or that I crave or that I desire for the kind of impact that I want to have in the world. And there is a balance here of we don't want to charge. I get really heated whenever I see advice of like, well, just charge more because you can. Like, I don't know that that's the right framework to have here, but like be considerate of the number of like, what is the number that one, you're going to show up and not be like groggy and resentful, and like eventually $1,500, you're going to be kind of like feeling some sort of way about it, especially if you have a tough and challenging client. And what is the number that's going to challenge your client to show up to every single
yeah,
call, whether they want to or not, or whether they're having feelings or not? Like, what is the price point? And we get to titrate and kind of like play around with it. But that's like why our mentorship never went over 16K, is because it
yeah,
didn't feel good. It didn't feel right. We had a wait list a mile long. We were told to, but like it didn't feel correct to go higher than that because it wasn't in service to the people we were coaching, like genuinely.
yeah,
And so it's in the vein of predictability, like having packages, having payment plans, having that sort of stuff is what I think creates a little bit of safety, especially in the first 3, 4 years of your business
Right.
until your tolerance increases for the waves.
Right. Yeah. And you guys can design your packages that reflect you. And so I'll give you one example here. We let's say that you started out at $1,500 for your 3-month package and the client's got 9 calls. And then you meet a client who is a single mom who is really struggling financially, and she is your ideal client and you want to serve her. One thing that you can do is you could lower the amount of deliverables. You could do calls every other week with like homework assignments in between and require them to email you something. It's a little more back end work, upfront work for you, but you're staying connected to them. And then you could lower that price for them so that it's
Mhm.
6 calls instead of 9 calls. There's ways for you to still charge in this way, have the price be a little bit lower and not resent your own practice. And we
Yeah.
never want you to think that you need to be rigid. Like, you get to be
Mhm.
creative. What will likely happen is you're going to go propose 1,500 for coaching. And then when you go to say the price, you say something like 900 because you can't imagine saying something over 1,000. I did that so many times. And then they'd be like, oh my God, that's so cheap. Yeah, let me pay for it right now. And then I'd be like, damn it, I did it again. I did it again. I had my own fear around money, and it interfered with the process. And that's going to happen. That's totally okay. It's
Mhm.
totally okay.
Yeah.
But this is why you guys need sales training. This is
Mhm.
this is why, because this is a process and it takes time. And once you learn it, you have it forever. And I'm just so passionate about you guys having real business coaching, which really includes sales training. It's not just how are you feeling? What goals do you want to create in your business? It's understanding this process so deeply in and out and understanding how to make you better at it, to really foster the inner ethical, amazing advocate that you have inside of you to sell coaching.
Yep. So that whenever you do propose $1,500 and your client gets wide eye saucer eyes, and they're like, wow, that's more
Yeah.
than I was expecting. Then you have we're not like in the art of convincing people, but like being able to have the language and the confidence to be like, I totally hear you. It is an investment. It's designed this way on purpose because if I charge anything less, I found that my clients get about 50% of the results that they set out to. And I'm happy, like we can jump into, we teach you guys how to navigate resistance, how to get to the core of what the client is experiencing or feeling. Like, do they need to get over the sticker shock and then, curb their Amazon habit for the next 3 months? Or do they need to go talk to their unsupportive partner? Like, there's all of these different ways that this conversation can go. But like, honestly, it's kind of like the coaching relationship begins once the number leaves your mouth, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like, that's,
It's an important moment.
yep.
It's an important moment because you're asking, once you say the price, there is a choice point on the table for the client. And
Mhm.
that's a really important moment for them that we want you to be able to hold like a coach and not hold afraid of talking about money.
Right. Totally, totally, totally. And there's been a lot of times, team, where I've said the number out loud and people get the saucer eyes. This is before we had our price like broadcasted everywhere when it was still like a secret whenever people got on
Hmm.
calls with us. And they're like, well, that was more than I was expecting. And I was like, I hear you. Do you want to figure it out? And that was the only question I asked. And they just like sat there in a few moments in silence. And they're like, yeah, okay. Like I can move some things around. This is something that I really want. And I'll get,
Yeah,
I'll pay you on Thursday or whatever the thing is. And that's like so much more badass than like new coach Shelby would have handled it, like
right.
there's an important choice point. I like the way you phrase that.
Yeah. And if people are buying sessions one-offs as they go, is there ever really a commitment or a choice point? No. They're just
Mhm.
paying for minutes to talk about stuff to you. They're paying for minutes with you. They are not bought into their vision. They're not bought into their own transformation, and they're not committed.
Mhm.
And so it's just the wrong model for this particular service
Yeah.
95% of the time. And
Yeah.
this is a new spin on an old concept, but I know we have so many new coaches in our community lately, and this has been floating around. And we wanted to make this for you guys. So you kind of knew the why behind it and a little bit of the backstory and the importance of great sales training so that you too
Mhm.
can say $1,500, not want to vomit, have people say yes, and get to serve them
Yeah.
and see their results and have
Totally.
their testimonials. It's a fun process. That's a really fun process to coach somebody. They get results. They're excited. You're excited. You earn money doing something that you love. That wouldn't happen in a 60-minute session with you or I
Mhm.
necessarily.
Yeah. It's almost like that's why we don't charge for application calls. We don't charge for like all the
Yeah.
free coaching that we do, to be honest. You got to like pay to enter the container with us. Yep. And one last little nugget of a story before we wrap up here. We just wrapped up a year 2 mentorship with like our master's clients this August, and one of the one of our really successful graduates of that program, we kind of like scooped her up right outside of right at the end of certification. She's basically been with us for the first 2 years of her business. And she's so sweet. She's like, I don't know what my business looks like without you guys. Like, I'm kind of freaking out. I'm kind of excited, all the things. So she's like, but the one thing that stood out to me whenever I had my application call for this space with me was I asked you, like, what makes people successful in this container? And I told her, like, people who are successful just decide that they are successful. Like, they just repeatedly decide that they're going to be successful and they double down. And it's like arduous. It's not easy, but they simply decide. And not that I was particularly like making a hard pitch in that moment. She's like, but that's when I decided. I decided on that call that like I was going to get the most out of this year, and I did. And I'm so proud of all these X, Y, and Z things that I've accomplished.
Yeah.
And like again, the choice point for people, like even if they tell you no, that is still a part of the choice, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so kind to hold that choice point for folks.
Yeah. And we get, because we do year 2 masters, we get to see nurse coaches making $10,000 months all the time.
All the
Like
time.
all the time for years. It is not reserved for the super talented special. It's just not reserved for them. It's just they decided. You're so right. They just
Mhm.
decided. And if you decide for 18 to 24 months, that's where you end up.
Yeah, if you decide to get good at something for 2 years straight, you're probably gonna
Yes.
get good at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
For
totally.
sure,
Totally.
for sure. Oh, all right. Well, this was fun. I like talking about this today. Kind of feels good to have like a frame of reference whenever someone's like, "Should I be charging per hour?" We can just like send them this
Yeah. This is
conversation
for
and
you. This is
yeah.
for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Uh,
And if you are listening and new to this podcast, we have an awesome free Facebook community. We do workshops every month. And if you are a nurse, not yet certified, go hang out in Nurse Life Coach Academy Facebook group. We've
yeah.
got 2 groups now, 2 communities that are growing by numbers by the day because nurse coaching is taking off even more now than it was 5 years ago. We'd love to support you in any part of the journey that you're in.
All right, team. See you next week.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.